Welcome back to Sophie and Jumong Part 33. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you won't miss any part. At the arrivals gate, her uncle stood waving wildly, his wide grin barely contained behind thick-rimmed glasses. Her mother came last. Sophie melted into her arms. No words passed. Her mother placed her palm gently on Sophie's belly, then whispered, "I prayed for this child, and now you bring them home." They rode back in the big white van her uncle borrowed from church, the suitcases tied tightly on the roof, the family singing softly in the back. Sophie leaned her head against the window, watching the familiar dirt roads stretch into fields of maize and sunflowers, her fingers tracing slow circles over her stomach. At the house, the celebration had already begun. Colored fabrics draped across the gate. Women stirred large pots over open fires. An old radio blasted golden oldies as Auntie Naomi directed the younger girls to sweep the front yard with palm brooms. When Sophie stepped from the car, a cheer went up. Neighbors streamed in. A small girl ran up with a bunch of wildflowers and whispered, "Welcome, Miss Bride." She was ushered into the house like royalty. In her childhood room, now transformed into a bridal sanctuary, her suitcase was already opened, her dresses neatly unpacked. She stood for a long moment in front of the mirror. She didn't look like the girl who had left for university in Korea. She looked like a woman walking toward something sacred. That night, under a star-filled sky, she sat on the porch beside her mother. They shared a bowl of roasted groundnuts and warm ginger tea, their laughter soft. Sophie's bare feet brushed the familiar floorboards as she asked, "Was it hard when you were pregnant with me?" Her mother smiled. "Hard doesn't begin to describe it. But every morning when I felt you kick, I remembered why I had to keep going." Sophie reached for her hand. "I'm scared, Mama." "I'd be more worried if you weren't," her mother replied, brushing a braid from her daughter's face. "Fear is how you know it matters." Then the phone buzzed. It was a message from Jumong, just a voice note. She put it on speaker. "I tried to eat, but the food tasted like air. I sat by the fireplace and read your note 3 times. I looked at your empty seat and imagined you teasing me again about overcooking rice. Sophie, I miss you so much, it's almost unfair. But I'm counting hours now, not days. I love you. Rest well tonight, both of you." Her mother squeezed her hand tightly. "That boy," she whispered. "He speaks like an elder, but he loves like a boy in a fairy tale." Before Sophie went to sleep, she felt a strong wave of nausea but didn't want to trouble her mother. When her mother came in to say goodnight, she thanked Sophie for bringing her joy and for choosing to marry from Namibia. She spoke of her paternal aunties, especially Auntie McKenna, who had harbored dislike for Sophie's mother even back when she was still married to McKenna's brother, Sophie's dad. "You have made me proud by becoming a doctor and getting married. Please stay calm. I know you're feeling emotional. Now you're becoming a mother, too." She kissed Sophie goodnight, and Sophie whispered back, "I love you, Mom." Somewhere beyond the window, a night bird called once, then silence again. And in that silence, Sophie twisted under her thin blanket, her hands gripping the fabric near her chest, her brow wet with cold sweat. She was dreaming. But it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like something else. Something waiting just beyond the veil of reality. In her dream, she stood alone in a wide, endless field. The sky above was a swirl of gray mist. There were no stars, no wind, only the distant, muffled sound of something crying. A baby. She couldn't see it, but she could hear it. The crying was sharp, then soft, then sharp again, as though it were being taken away and brought back. She turned in all directions, trying to find the source, calling out, "Where are you? Where are you?" No answer, only that sound. Then she saw something moving in the fog, a shadow, gliding forward, slow and steady. It took the shape of a woman. She had no face, only a mouth. And when it opened, the voice that came out was like whispering wind through dry leaves. "You were not supposed to carry light in this house." Sophie stumbled backward. Her feet were bare, and the earth beneath her began to soften like wet ash. She looked down and saw that her white dress, simple, clean, was darkening. Blood. A bloom of red spreading from her waist downward. "No," she whispered. "No, no, please." But the voice only grew colder. "The child will not stay where they are not welcomed." Sophie gasped and awoke with a jolt. She sat upright in bed, heart thudding, throat dry, chest tight. The blanket clung to her skin like dew. Her hands trembled as she reached between her legs. She checked quickly, then slowly. There it was. A faint spot, barely a smear, but real. Blood, small but unmistakable. A rush of dizziness hit her. Her mind scrambled between panic and reason. She was still. She hadn't fallen. She hadn't lifted anything. Maybe it was nothing. But the dream. The blood. She stood shakily, feet cold against the cement floor, and made her way across the room. Her fingers fumbled for the door latch. It clicked open. The hallway was dark, but a dim yellow light came from the kitchen. Her mother was awake. Sophie stepped slowly, her hand pressed low against her stomach, as though trying to keep something safe. She reached the doorway. Her mother turned at the sound of her breathing. "Baby?" her mother said softly, squinting. "It's still dark outside." Sophie's voice came out broken. "Mama, I had a dream, a bad one, and I think something's wrong." She stood there, shoulders hunched, her nightdress clinging to her body, eyes wide and frightened. Her mother moved instantly, rushing forward, placing both hands on Sophie's face. "What is it? What happened? Did you fall? Sit down, come, sit. Sophie obeyed numbly, lowering herself onto the wooden kitchen stool. "There was blood," she whispered. Her mother froze, just for a second. Then she took a breath. "How much?" "Just a small drop," Sophie replied, looking down. "But it was after the dream." Her mother knelt beside her, resting a hand on Sophie's belly. "Tell me the dream." Sophie swallowed. Her voice trembled through the telling. The fog, the baby's cry, the faceless woman, the blood, the words. "You were not supposed to carry light in this house." When she finished, silence stretched in the kitchen. Then her mother, eyes narrowed, stood slowly. She walked to the cabinet and brought out a worn Bible, setting it gently on the table. "We'll pray," she said. She took Sophie's hands in hers. They were warmer now. "I will not let anyone take you from joy," her mother whispered fiercely. "You hear me, Sophie? Not people, not spirits, not dreams. This house may not be perfect, but it is yours. And no voice in the dark gets to say who deserves light." Tears filled Sophie's eyes. They bowed their heads, and the prayer that followed was not whispered. It was loud, firm, fire wrapped in tenderness. When it ended, Sophie took a deep breath. The pain in her belly had faded, the blood had stopped, and the voice in her dream was gone. Sophie stood quietly near the doorway, arms folded over her midsection, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes scanned the yard with a kind of distant calm. Her body was here, but part of her mind was still in that strange dream. The whispers, the blood, the faceless woman, and that chilling phrase, "You were not supposed to carry light in this house." Her mother had prayed with her until dawn. The blood had stopped. The cramps had faded. But something inside still trembled. Not pain, not fear. Just an alertness she couldn't shake off. "Sophie!" her mother called gently from the far side of the yard, where she was directing the young cousins to set up extra benches under the jacaranda tree. "Drink something hot before you dress. You need to keep warm." "I will, Mama," Sophie replied softly. She walked back into the kitchen, the morning light casting bright patches across the floor. Her aunt from her mother's side, Auntie Mado, was busy making fresh bread and stirring a pot of maize porridge. She glanced up, smiling warmly. "Bride-to-be, today you just sit and glow," she teased. Sophie gave a small smile but didn't reply. By mid-morning, the compound was alive. Handmade mats were being dusted, iron pots scrubbed with ash until they gleamed, and strings of beads and fabric flowers tied to tree branches. The air hummed with preparation and pride. Children ran with laughter through the yard, carrying firewood, jugs of water, and small woven baskets. One small cousin carefully carried a folded Namibian flag and placed it next to the Korean flag already mounted on a pole by the garden. From the corner of her eye, Sophie saw a white van turning into the dusty path leading to the compound. She knew without asking. The paternal relatives had arrived. Aunt McKenna stepped out first. She was wrapped in layers of thick traditional cloth, her towering head wrap a deep rust color that matched her mood. Her face wore the expression of someone who had come to observe, not celebrate. Two other aunts followed, slightly younger but just as stern. The compound elders welcomed them warmly, and Sophie's mother offered them a basin to wash their hands, as was custom. McKenna smiled tightly and nodded. Sophie approached with a respectful curtsy and lowered eyes. "Auntie," she said softly, "you are welcome." McKenna nodded, her voice syrupy with pride and edge. "Thank you, child. You look healthy." A pause, slight emphasis on the word. Sophie caught it but didn't react. "We are glad you could come," she replied simply. McKenna smiled. "Well, how could we not? A wedding is not for one family, it is for two." Then she glanced around. "I hope the roots of your father are being honored in this house where joy is being prepared." Sophie's mother stepped forward then, arms folded over her waist. "This house has never denied its roots. We remember where we came from, and we have opened the gates to every branch." McKenna only smiled again, but her eyes did not. By late morning, the meeting structure had been set. A wide circle of wooden chairs, plastic stools, and thick mats formed beneath the jacaranda tree. Water basins, juice flasks, and fruit baskets sat at the center, surrounded by folded papers and ceremonial beads. The family wedding meeting, where matters like dowry customs, blessing speeches, and spiritual rites would be discussed, was moments away. Sophie excused herself and returned to her room to change. Her mother followed and closed the door behind them. As Sophie tied the final sash around her waist, her mother watched her in silence for a moment. "You don't have to pretend to be strong today," she said. Sophie turned, her eyes gentle but distant. "I'm not pretending," she said. "But I'm watching. I don't know why, Mama. But I feel like something is watching me, too." Her mother stepped forward, adjusted the collar of Sophie's blouse, and kissed her forehead. "Then let it watch," she whispered. "Let it watch and see that you are protected." Sophie nodded, but the ache in her chest stayed. Outside, the drums began their slow welcome beat. The meeting was about to begin. The jacaranda tree spread wide above the gathering, its violet blossoms trembling gently in the midday breeze. Beneath it, the family wedding meeting had begun. Elders from both the maternal and paternal sides of Sophie's family sat in a large circle, some on traditional carved chairs, others on low stools or woven mats. Children were told to stay back. The business of marriage was adult terrain. Only the teenage cousins, sent to serve drinks and note-take quietly, were allowed to linger at the edges. At the center, a low table had been prepared with bottles of water, dried meat, roasted groundnuts, a jug of ginger beer, and several papers tied with ribbon. A ceremonial calabash sat on the left, untouched for now. The breeze carried the smell of dust and firewood, and somewhere not far off, someone pounded millet with a soft, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. Sophie and her mother sat on the left side of the circle, along with two uncles from her mother's family, and Auntie Mado, who represented the Women's Council. Sophie wore a simple ankle-length dress, her hair in neat braids pulled back from her face. She looked radiant, but her eyes didn't smile. On the opposite side sat Aunt McKenna and the other two sisters of Sophie's late father, as well as an older uncle from their village who had been invited as a courtesy. The meeting was opened by an elder from the church, a wise man named Baba Mweba who had known Sophie since she was born. He offered a prayer in both Oshiwambo and English, asking for unity, understanding, and peace. When he sat down, the formalities began. First came the reading of the bride price agreements, already discussed but now read aloud to affirm both families were satisfied. The uncles nodded. The items had been received. Livestock equivalents had been recorded, symbolic tokens of union accepted. Sophie sat silently, fingers gently pressed against her belly, tuning in and out of the voices as they spoke of traditions, dowries, responsibilities. Then came the turning point. Aunt Makina cleared her throat. With all due respect to the process, there is something that must be addressed before this union moves forward. All heads turned. Sophie's eyes narrowed subtly, but her face remained composed. "Speak," Baba Mweba said kindly. Makina stood, adjusting her head wrap. "It is not proper," she began, "for a daughter to be wed without the formal acknowledgement of her paternal roots. This wedding, while beautiful and blessed in preparation, must include a cleansing and blessing ritual, performed by her father's side. Otherwise, the ancestors will not accept it." Whispers fluttered among the gathered relatives. Sophie's mother sat still.